Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Unsecurity podcast. I'm your host, Brad Nye, joined as always by Megan Larkins. How
Hey,
are you doing,
Brad.
Megan?
We're doing pretty good.
Good. Good. So today we actually have two guests. Big day. First, we have Ryan Abraham, who's what's your title, Ryan? I am so prepared
Is
today.
this, I think, senior information security consultant,
There you go.
pod
Slash
manager, hive
manager.
Here,
leader.
here at FRSecure, and then we also have Scott Singer with CyberNINES. Scott, how are you?
I'm good. I want to know what unsecurity means, though. How did that come about?
That's a good question. So, actually, our founder, Evan Francine, wrote a book called Unsecurity, and it was kind of like what's wrong with the industry. And so he wrote that in 2017, I think, and then we started the podcast about 6 months after the book came out. And so we kept the name. Evan and I did that, and then Evan and I hosted it for several years. And then Oscar hosted it with me, and now Megan's hosting it with me. So I chase away co-hosts pretty regularly.
But yeah, we keep you keep getting new ones too, so it's not so bad.
You just need that.
I think
You need that fresh perspective.
Right.
right.
So, Scott, first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about CyberNINES? And for our listeners today, we're going to be talking about CMMC today. So
I was in the military for 30 years, so I've got a 60-page PowerPoint presentation that I'll start showing. If that's okay. No? Perfect. No. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. So most of my career I have been in the Twin Cities here, but I worked for the military, just kind of explained that a second ago. I was 4 years active and 26 reserve, and then did lots of cool stuff in the military, but did a little bit of IT stuff, but not a ton. And then went to work for a company called Medtronic, which, people in the Twin Cities will know what that is, and probably a lot of people actually. Pretty big company, 80,000 employees these days. I think it had about maybe 13, 15,000 when I joined quite a while ago. And worked there for 16 years and actually retired from there. So it seems like every job I've had, I ended up retiring from. The Navy retired from, Medtronic retired from. And then I worked for a defense contractor for about 10 years, which kind of set the table for what I'm doing right now. And after 10 years, we got bought out by a private company. And a lot of times when you get bought out, they bring in new management, and that gave me an opportunity to start my own company, which is kind of what I wanted to do kind of towards the end of my career here. And so started CyberNINES. We focus on supporting the defense industrial base, meet cybersecurity requirements around NIST, SP 800-171, and we do dabble in some other areas like supporting medical devices and helping small medical device manufacturers get through the pre-market authorization process to get their devices to market. But I look at it as I'm looking for an industry that has a demand for cybersecurity, and the Defense Department has demanded now having third-party assessment organizations come in and do assessments, and the FDA has demanded that products be safe, and so they have cybersecurity requirements now based on products. But CyberNINES is a C3PAO, and that's not one of those robots that you see on Star Wars or anything like that. You got to love the acronym, right? C3PAO, CMMC, Third Party Assessor Organization. So we're one of I think there's 59 right now, if my count is right, organizations that are authorized to do assessments on behalf of the DoD, and so we started doing assessments, and so that's me.
Very cool. So the 59 makes me think, how many? This is a question we get asked all the time. What is the defense industrial base that is going to have some level of CMMC requirement, and then what is the estimated that's going to need the actual audit?
Sure. So the DoD is estimated 80,000. I believe the number is quite a bit more because they don't have a good understanding of all the companies that get flowed down these requirements. And so I think the population is larger than 80,000 companies.
I would see, and like 150, 160, kind of double that number.
Yeah, so it's hard to know exactly what that is, but it's definitely bigger than the 80,000 that they do report on. So, and there's two different levels. There's the CMMC level 1, they call it, and CMMC level 2. Level 2 is the requirement for the third-party assessment by one of these 59 C3PAOs. And then there is a level 3, and the level 3 will be done by the Department of Defense, an organization called DIBCAC, Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment. I always forget the last C. Anyway, there's too many acronyms. You'd think after 30 years I'd have these acronyms down, but I'm sure Ryan's got it figured out. You know what DIBCAC is.
I'm with you. I forgot the last C.
Anyway, I can't remember. But anyway, I just use that term so much, DIBCAC. Anyway, they do the level 3, but in that case, a company like mine does the level 2, and then they come in and do the delta for level 3. Going back to level 1, they think there's about 300,000 companies that fall into that category. And that is a self-attestment. So you go into a government system and you say, yep, I'm good to go. And there's 17 cybersecurity requirements you have to meet for level 1. But you just get to say, yep, I meet them, or no, I don't meet them. And most people are not going to say, no, I don't meet them, right? Because they want to accept the award and get the order.
We definitely have. I know we've walked into companies where they were like, what? We don't do any of this stuff. And, you run a risk. There's a risk there. If something happens, you're going to get in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Maybe this will go into what you were going to say, Ryan, but I think one bit of confusion that we've heard is just like, who has to do it? How do you know that you need to be CMMC compliant or not? Is this something that you should pursue for marketing and sales intentions? And I know we've had to clear that up a fair bit, that it is a requirement for when you're working with the Department of Defense, and it should be written into your contract. Otherwise, it's probably not worth your time. But yeah, what are you going to say there, Ryan?
Well, kind of outside of that too is I was going to ask Scott, how many, if at all possible, level 1 organizations do you think will have a third-party auditor have to come in, or will there be none?
None. There's none required to come in. The only kind of caveat you have to be a little bit careful of if you're one of these companies, and first of all, a level 1 CMMC requirement comes out of, a good example I could have is maybe you are a vendor that's selling food or something on a military base, and you have a contract to do that. You're going to fall into level 1 in that scenario, okay? And the information you have to protect is that contract information, and that's called federal contract information, and that falls under our current federal acquisition regulation, 52-204-21. I can rattle these numbers off, but that's a current requirement that all these companies have to do. The future, it used to be you just, when you got the contract, you would, by accepting the contract, you're accepting that acquisition clause. So they're expecting you to do that. And then the new requirement is that an affirming official, you got to love that term, that's normally somebody that, like, a small company, the CEO or the CFO or somebody like that, needs to go into a government system and actually attest that they meet level 1. And the system is called the Supplier Performance Risk System. In the short, you always hear the term SPURS, right?
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Think about that for a minute. Even for these CMMC level 1 people that are self-attesting, they are now going into a government system and they're saying that I'm either compliant or not.
Right.
So if you willingly say you're compliant in a government system, you can get hit with this thing called the False Claims Act.
Mm.
And you might think that, no, that's never going to happen to me, or they're ramping up enforcement these days. In fact, you might have heard of some schools like Georgia Tech, Penn State.
Yeah.
Some of those schools have been hit by this already. And so you have to be a little careful. Anytime you're attesting to a government site, you need to be clear that you know what you're doing. So back to your kind of question, Ryan, I think that could generate some, queries or requests by folks like yourselves where they get this request to post a score on Spurs. How do I do this? What do I do? And by engaging companies like yours or mine, then you're going to be better able to not have to worry about looking in the rearview mirror and worrying about something that I did wrong. And
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. With CMMC, you can't do like the readiness and the actual audit assessment, correct? They want two different, like it needs to be separated out.
Correct. One, for example, we do consulting, but we also do assessments, CMMC assessments. So if we can't do both for the same company. So we can't consult and assess.
Yeah, and
That's important for people to know too, because a lot of you'll see the SOC 2s and some of those where it's like, really?
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to do that now.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that's like to avoid a potential conflict of interest of you've
Correct.
helped them get ready, and so they've paid you to help them be ready to perform that
You're not
audit.
going to say
And you're
you didn't
also
do it.
testing yourself. Yeah, it's like writing the test and grading it too. So, yeah.
And then, so Ryan, what are you seeing, or what are the questions that you get the most from our customers? Because we only do the readiness piece, right? We only help them. We're not the assessor organization. So what are we seeing the most from our customers?
Yep. I would say the biggest thing that I see is just lack of understanding of the depth that they have to go for the controls. A lot of organizations just read the control statement and think they're good. Never even start adjusting or looking at the objectives, security objectives, the guidance. What does that stuff really mean, and how do they really apply that to their scope? They just don't get how big it is.
Even for a level 1.
Right. Yeah, I had a client that they had to do a level 1, and they're kind of what you described, Scott. They're providing services to a base, and they're like, it should be a piece of cake. It's 17 controls, and they're like, we'll have this done in a week. I think we are 6 months on, and they're still working through stuff. And it's just the depth of it.
Do you have any examples, Ryan, of the thing like of something they thought would be simple, and then as you dug into it further with them, it just kind of became maybe not infinitely more complicated, but significantly more complex?
Yep. Just the first control, 3.1.1, authorized users, and then limiting the scope to those authorized users, coming in and actually defining that. Like, I try to push them to the point where there would be an auditor coming, because Scott said, I don't want them to put information on a government website and not be able to it be true. Yeah. So when they do that, we define the scope. I'm like, you need to, every user in your scope, you have to be able to prove that they're authorized. How do you do that? Just, there is no processes, there's no procedures, there's no documentation for that. And just creating everything was almost like a mountain.
Oh. Yeah. Well, Scott, we've seen the government DOD has said 18 to 24 months to get to compliance. What are you seeing? Is that about an accurate estimate?
So I know for myself, we as a C3PAO, we had to get assessed by the DOD. I did it quite a while ago, and it took me about 1.5 years, but I was creating everything from scratch, all the policies, procedures, everything that created our whole environment. So it took me about 18 months. We have been helping companies get through it in about a year.
Okay.
Okay. But we're pulling all those policies and procedures that we created from our journey. We call it a journey. From our journey, we pull those and use those to help clients get through. So, we've had a couple clients try and go faster, but the biggest impediment to that is really time and people's availability to do the work. And it's, they've got day jobs, they're doing their normal, kind of,
Right.
user support, whatever it is they're doing. And they also have to then throw in a very comprehensive program to put in place to meet NIST 800-171, and that's where we run into the issue. So, people should plan on about a year, and that year is with people focused on it.
Okay. Yeah. So we're talking a pretty heavy lift.
Yep. I would go back to a couple things that I've heard at different conferences where people are saying that you'd have a dedicated body, 40 hours a week, per 100 to 150 people who are within your scope.
Wow. Okay.
It also depends, I think, Ryan, on the partner that you pick, right? Are they experienced in this space? And, having people that have been through actual assessments, I think, goes a long way to helping the company get through it. And I know, Ryan, you've been through one, and, I've been through quite a few. And that's important to help folks, because then it's like you have firsthand experience with what an assessor is actually going to look for. And in the end, the assessors aren't looking for science projects to answer these, assessment objectives. It's just, if it asks, how long session termination or a session timeout should be, you put down 15 minutes and then you go look in your system and make sure it's set for 15 minutes. That sounds simple, right?
Mhm.
But that's what I'm looking for as an assessor, that, you documented it a certain way, and the system, you've implemented the system in the same way.
Okay. Yeah, I would say when it comes to CMMC, that allowing us to sit in on that assessment was the most valuable thing I could do for all the readiness projects that we do.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Well, I think picking the right partner, Scott, is important. And, the CMMC does have its marketplace. You can go look. Obviously, CyberNINES would be listed under the C3PL. FRSecure, we're a RPO, registered practitioner organization, which means we've done the training and everything to be able to help people be prepared for CMMC. I would say be very wary of that easy button. If you hear it, we can come in and get you ready in a month. Probably not.
Yeah, I think we've seen already a couple products coming out and saying that they will kind of easy button CMMC compliance for you, and have already heard of the challenges. That wasn't quite so true from a client or two of ours, because on the sales call, it's really easy to make it sound like the process will be easy. We've got the templates ready for you. You can just, apply them, no problem, to your organization. The framework is here and provided for you, but they don't, there's still the people part of that, of actually implementing those processes, those policies across your organization, making sure, just like Scott was saying, that just because you have a policy that says your timeout is 15 minutes, like, you still have to go and change it consistently across your environment. Make sure you know every system, every person that's going to interact with that CUI data. And then you have to make sure that it's audible and can be tracked, and show that you're reliably tracking that. So it's, or even set up some of that automation that will be testing automatically for you after you've established it, after you've tested it and made those connections with the software too.
Yeah. I actually had a client that they hired us to interpret RSAT controls from an Air Force base that they were trying to get a job at, and they hired another third party to come in and implement 800-171.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't within our statement of work, so I just kind of sat there and watched him. And the guy, the first time on the phone call, he said, "I will do this for you within 30 days." I was like, I want to see this. Like, show to me. Obviously, he did not do it, and I think he was about 50%, about 90 days in before he went off to someone else, and they brought someone else in.
Yeah, that's the other problem you run into a lot of times. Lack of consistency of some of those bigger.
Well, the other thing is we don't want to scare people either. It's a doable thing when you get a good partner to work with you to get through it and you put the time into it. The controls, for the most part are pretty straightforward. There are a couple that are a little bit complicated, and having a partner that understands what the assessor is looking for this control goes a long way. And so if you're trying to do it yourself, you can kind of spend a lot of time on some areas where you really didn't need to if you had understood, what that assessor is looking for in that particular control. And there's also the framework's not prescriptive in that there's all kinds of different solutions you can come to the table with to meet and be compliant. And so that's just something to be aware of, that there's different ways to go about, meeting or solving the requirement. And so I've seen lots of different ways and to meet something. And the other issue is you end up having situations where you can have a one-person company be a defense contractor, right? And they still have to meet the same standard as, the large primes, that are building aircraft and airplanes. So it's the same standard no matter what. Now, obviously, the scope is much different when you're talking about a multinational versus, a one-person company. And you get into some really kind of tricky situations because the standard also talks about independence, and least privilege and all kinds of different things. How do you do that when you have one person, right?
Yeah.
But we found a way we actually went through and dealt with the process with a one-person company.
Was that using third parties or finding some exceptions?
It was fine. Yeah. In some situations they have investors. And so you can use, forensic reporting to kind of manage some of that independence, because that's the only way that you can do it.
Okay.
So.
Interesting. I like to say, it's hard work, but it's not difficult. What I mean is we can keep it simple, but there's a lot of it to do.
It's critical. I'll tell you one little story because I think it's relevant here, because if this whole process of meeting NIST 800-171, excuse me, it goes back literally to 2013, because there's the acquisition regulation for meeting cybersecurity came out in late 2013. And that was a result of an RSA hack and breach that was hitting an aircraft manufacturer, I won't name names, and that hit me personally. So the company that I worked for, we were breached after the larger prime got breached. And I had the luck of having one of my board members be the prior Secretary of the Navy. So if you can think about that, right? Because we were doing Navy projects, and that's the information that got breached, was some related information for an aircraft carrier. And so that was my baptism here, by trial by fire, of trying to deal with this and trying to get myself not get fired after the breach happened and everything else. But back at that point, I was like, I had firewalls, I had virus protection, I had those kind of standard things in place, and I thought it was pretty good. And I was actually, after this happened and everything, and the rule came out, we had to meet this really complex standard called NIST 853. There was no 800-171. That came out in 2017, and I know I'm probably losing people here on all this stuff, but that didn't come out to 2017. And when that came out, 800-171, it went from like 1,200, controls I had to meet down to 110. I was like, whoa, this is awesome, right? And 1200 to 110, that's great. But so it's gotten a little easier over time. They've tried to make it a little easier, but they kept finding over time that there was only about maybe 10 to 15% compliance to this whole standard. Whenever they did an IG investigation, the DOJ, they would find out that there just wasn't much compliance. So that's really what created this whole CMMC program, was the fact that people just weren't complying with this requirement. And the reality is they kind of didn't know how either. Okay, just to be fair, it was kind of a complicated thing for some small business to try and figure out what I needed to do with this. Okay, but now they kind of forced their hand here. They're real serious about this third party assessment. All CMMC is a DoD program to have third party assessment of the NIST 800-171 requirement. So it's not some new standard, some new thing. It's just a third party assessment of the program. So anyways, that's a little bit of, kind of the history of how we got here. Plus kind of like, why did Scott get so interested in this whole thing? It's because I almost got fired at the beginning and kind of stayed with it.
That is baptism by fire. No question about that.
Yeah. I appreciate that clarification, because I know we've ended up, or I've been in some conversations too, where they're just confused about what are they needing to comply to. Is it this CMMC thing? And I had one of my clients come and said they talked to an expert about it, and they were throwing out all sorts of things that was like this thing plus these other controls and the other thing. And I'm like, no, it's just NIST 800-171. Well, then where do the other things come in? I don't know. That's what the other guy told you. But yeah, I think slowly, hopefully, the information is getting better out there. I know I've seen several conversations now that it's like, look in your contract, see if it's in your contract. It'll tell you exactly what you need to do.
I would say too is if you're working with a third party to help you understand this stuff, and they are throwing out difficult terms, won't explain it to you, very complex, I'd be looking somewhere else.
Yeah. Really got to vet those.
I don't know, Brad, Megan, maybe it makes sense just to give a 2-second where things are at right now.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask you. We've seen a lot of changes over the last couple of years. Where do things stand right now?
Yeah, and probably people were thinking, well, with all the executive orders that Trump's thrown out, maybe this whole CMMC thing will get thrown out too with everything else. And by the way, the executive orders that have not been rescinded so far have been the cybersecurity ones. So none of those have gotten dropped from the last administration. So let me give you kind of a high level where things are at. So on January 2nd, C3PAOs were authorized to start doing CMMC assessments. So we are doing real assessments, and so far there have been about 100 defense contractors that have gone through these CMMC assessments. My company has done 2 so far. So, what authorized, us to start doing this? Well, there are 2 acquisition regulations that have to go through the process for this program to work. The first one is called 32 CFR Part 170. That created the whole CMMC program and created the C3PAOs and created our authority to do assessments. And that came out late 2024. With that, it allows us to start doing these assessments, but they don't show up in contracts yet. Okay, so there's no contract anywhere that has a CMMC requirement in it yet. However, the DoD now has the ability at their option to put it in a contract. So I do think we're going to start to see a couple show up, but they can't actually show up until the second rule comes out called 48 CFR. That creates a Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. It's going to be DFARS 252-204-7021. When that clause comes out and shows up in the big prime contract, it'll then get flowed down to the companies that most of us support, the small, medium-sized businesses, and all of a sudden now we have to start worrying about it, okay? So what does that timeline look like? Well, again, we're doing assessments now, and there is some pressure from prime contractors to their subs to get ready and go get an assessment so that you can be ready to do it. So that might have more bearing if your prime is telling you you need to do this than some acquisition regulation, right? Then the 48 CFR rule that has this clause in it is scheduled to come out probably late summer, fall. There'll probably be a little bit of delay with the transition of administrations. And so let's say it comes out into the fall of 2025. Then there is a year of pause, okay, of where it's not required to show up on a contract, but DoD can put them in. And then after that, it's going to start showing up. And they're going to phase roll this out, okay? So you're probably hearing companies tell you the sky is falling, you got to get ready now. Well, yes, you really, because remember, it takes a year to get through this process. Mm-hmm. So you really should have started already. And if you haven't, get started. But you're not in extremis yet. And a lot of other people will tell you are in extremis. But in reality, you do have a little time to get ready here, okay? But find a partner, get going, get started on this. And then be prepared that if you intend to be a defense contractor, that these things are going to start to show up literally in late 2026, and you can guarantee it's going to show up in 2027. So that's kind of maybe, I guess we used in the military call it the bottom line up front. Be ready to go in this. Start working on this now, but be ready for it to show up in your contracts and between 2026 and 2027.
Thank you, Scott. So if I'm understanding you correctly, because I think I've heard a few different things, but I think you maybe clarified that too, is that DoD or different departments can write it in as a requirement to win the contract now, but they aren't required to require your compliance.
Yeah, and right? I might have confused that a little bit. They can't put it in the contract.
Oh, they can't. But I know some subcontracts are out there.
The 48 CFR rule comes out in late 2025.
But we have heard that it is being written into some contracts. Is that?
But it doesn't count.
Oh, okay? Interesting.
It's not it's not legally binding because there's no 48 CFR rule that can make it legally binding.
Okay, it's good to know. Thank you.
Interesting. Well, Scott, thank you. That was really, really informative. Hopefully, it helped our listeners as well. It was helpful for me. We are wrapping up here. We always do a shout out, Scott, so I'll let you go last, but just a shout out to someone or a team that you've got some gratitude for. So Megan, I'll let you go first.
I should be more ready for this by now. Gosh, no, I think I'll just maybe do a shout out to my co-leaders, I guess I could say, in kind of middle management at FRSecure. We had a kind of leadership meeting, not last week, the week before here at FRSecure, and it was kind of nice to just reflect on how much we've grown as kind of director, manager level leaders and grown together and have been working together more to solve problems together at FRSecure, face our challenges, keep things moving forward. So it's been an honor to work with them and get to know them better this last year.
Nice. I guess I'll go because I sprung it on Ryan too, but he should at least know. I think I'm gonna give. I know I should be more prepared for this too. I've done this for 200 and some odd episodes. I'm going to go ahead and give it to our marketing people for the help behind the scenes with the podcast, which has been a huge help, and also getting ready for the CISSP, our mentor program that we just opened up registration for, and all the work that they do behind the scenes. So shout out to them. Ryan?
Yep, I will do it to my internal pod team. So just for everyone, we do kind of VCSOs through group efforts. A newer thing at FRSecure, and without them, there's nowhere I would even be sane enough to be sitting here doing this. So just all the support and stuff that they give me.
And Scott?
Well, you'd think after listening to everybody, I'd be ready to go and jumping right in there.
It's harder than you think.
I want to thank, at CyberNINES, I want to thank the team because, when we're starting up, we're kind of transitioning from like that startup phase to being a kind of a normal growing concern kind of company. And so this is now, I guess, our 4th year in business, and we've been kind of growing every year. We're up to about 16 people, which is cool. And so I'm going to shout out to the group for supporting our growth and keeping us going and letting me focus on the things I want to do, which is, assess companies and come up with the policies, procedures, and processes to help us grow. And they're filling in all the voids that make us work.
Very nice. Awesome. All right, Megan, do we have anything for upcoming episodes?
We got to finalize some details, but next time we'll be inviting our own Mike Kay to talk about his decades of doing information security, working with us, and his history prior. So I think it'll be a nice look back on some good information security experience.
Can I be on that one too? I got some stories about Mike then.
Yeah, we'll make a surprise appearance of just drop everybody else in. A little podcast hazing.
And if you have any comments, you can always email us at unsecurity@FRSecure.com.
Yep, that's right.
All right. Thank you, everyone.